things in our head, you know what I mean? And it's like that is a different animal than just sort of the pragmatist. I see these things in front of me. I think of them as building blocks. This thing's made out of wood. This thing's made out of metal. I know I've repeated this before, but sort of being able to wrap your head around the fact that, say, a sentient being has, for example, a shape, right? Uh, and its shape, the process of the shape itself, like has certain determinatenesses to it conceptually. It's a very different animal from, no pun intended, from the sort of like flat materialist things in our head. You know what I mean?
Sorry, apparently YouTube
No,
loves
you're no, you're
auto
fine.
playing the video. Yeah, dumb life. I like how he calls it crystallization, dumb life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense to get his chemical.
The curious thing about that is some scientists believe that life actually did evolve from crystals. As far as I know, they were not, the scientists were not familiar with Hegel, but
Well, it's funny because if you look further down the microscope, right, and you start getting into like life processes, right? We have parts of our bodies that are or used to be independent animals or plants,
yeah, yeah,
right? And if you look below that, you have the cells within both of those that have like processes that store like the instructions within the DNA and so on and so forth. And at that level, I mean, I'm not even sure like those instructions at the DNA level could be called living animals or plants or anything like that. It's more like crystallization of these processes like encoded, right? Like C++ plus plus
yeah.
or whatever, and you zoom out and all of these things like turn us into us or, your house plant into what it's doing, you know. And so you go down to a certain micro level and that crystal, that dumb life is still doing what it's doing, except it's millions and millions of those processes coming together to create, smart life. I'm sort of struck because I remember reading in Capital, Marx talked about um simple and complex labor and how he was only going to talk about capital and exchange processes and whatnot in terms of simple labor because you can quantify it in a homogeneous manner, whereas complex labor that requires more degrees and that stuff, that could be broken down into simple labor. And I think this is a case of kind of the same thing because if you look at all life from sentient all the way down to plant and all of that, it can all be, if properly looked at, um, missing that word out of my head. What's the mathematics? What's the arithmetic word? Uh, where you shit. You know when you have you know when you have a fraction and you have figures on the top and the bottom and you cancel them out and what's left is what you have.
Least common denominator.
Yeah. Well, no.
Uh,
Um boiled it down to
the least common denominator, or well,
well, maybe that's right. I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah, because it's
Yeah, because
canceling.
you like cancel out a bunch of terms because you know they're both on the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
You know what comes out when you compare complex and simple life forms is that sort of dumb life crystallization process is what I'm trying to say, and I think that compares well to Marx's simple versus complex labor.
Mhm.
Um, that to me was one of the sticking points for me just as an aside, when I first read Capital, like he talks about complex labor and then he just sort of shoos it aside, like, oh, we can talk about that later, but it doesn't really matter. And it was always a sticking point for me until I figured out that he just meant that you could sort of boil it down to equating complex labor to simple labor because it was made of the same stuff, just at a different level of intensity. You know, like we are a high level of intensity of this dumb life, this crystallization of processes and so forth. Anyway, hope that makes sense to our audience. Is itself the end, freely active on its own account. In water, there is thus an invisible germ of force which constructs. Yeah, this shape is regular in the strictest sense, but because it is not yet a process of its own self, it is a regularity only in the body as a whole. It's one form being constituted by the parts taken together. Yeah, he's basically repeating what some of what I just said.
Yeah.
This is why I love Hegel is that he has a lot of this stuff pretty well worked out. I wish if I could take a time machine back, I would not go in the past and kill Hitler. I would go in the past and be a high school student under Hegel and learn logic. You know, that would be my thing. Uh, and I'd take back my cell phone and conquer the world.
It is not yet the organic formation whose determination is no longer conform to the understanding, since it is not yet subjective, it is still inorganic. Strict sense, but because it's not a process in its own self, right? Okay, yeah, it makes sense because each part can be understood if you're in the nature of the form. Yeah, in the living orders, therefore, each point of the periphery is the whole, just as I am sentient in every part of my body.
Hmm.
That's here's where he says why it's not based on straight lines, but you have curves, which I mean, I guess there is that tendency between inorganic and organic, but
Mm-hmm. In the living shape, we have curves, since each part of a curve can only be grasped through the whole law of the curve. That reminds me of what happens with fractals. Like if you see how fractals show up in nature, it's never a straight line. You know, it's always in curves.
yeah, and if you try to think of a fractal, it is like a straight line that then bends upon itself to the point to where effectively it becomes curved.
Exactly. And you look in nature and the shapes that nature makes, even the shell that washes up on the beach, you know, it was formed in the same fashion, so on and so forth. This is why I always loved looking at mathematical stuff is that, you know, um, if you did it right, you know, you could look at nature and see what it's doing and see the regularity in it. Suddenly the randomness disappears.
Yeah, and he goes into his time frame. Example of everything being curved, oval, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Ow.
You're right.
Oh, I was just taking something off. We now have to consider the shape further in its particular terminations, three of which should be distinguished. First, the abstractions of shape, which is, therefore, strictly speaking, the
The
shapeless,
shapeless.
which is being and pure nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The indeterminate shape. So, secondly, shape in its strict meaning, shape in the process of becoming, and shaping as an activity, shape not yet achieved. Magnetism, okay, that makes a lot more sense. And thirdly, real shape, as in this crystal, which is solid form. First, A, the immediate shape, or a shape which is posited as formless within itself, is one hand the extreme of the punctiform principle of brittleness. On the other hand, the extreme of the spherical shape is seen by liquids, shape as an inner shapelessness, which spherical is curved, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that makes sense. So we have both the brittleness of something that really can't hold its shape very well, and then the water, like the equivalent of the of what water cohesion, which also I guess is the same thing as the gravitational shape that eventually forms a sphere as well, just because it's all toward the center.
Yeah.
And so this, I mean, just my interpretation of his reading of this is it's a
Honey.
spectrum between entirely brittle to entirely spherical.
Yeah.
So fluid matter assumes a spherical shape, inwardly indeterminate. Is granular as a particular shape shown in platinum grains. Yeah, it's freely positive because it's ultimately the shape that's equidistant from the center. So that's probably what he's getting at, basically shapeless. And so there's no difference posited into it. Yeah, and there's no, okay, so the first one is utter brittleness is utter shapelessness, and then spherical is more defined but still shapeless because it's equal in all directions. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, anything looking at it? Okay.
Um,
Anything you want to say, basically?
hmm, hang on. It's almost like shape at first is just like the potential of shape. And here are the coordinates of what shape could be, but in being all that it could be, it's also nothing
Eh,
on the other end.
To me, almost feels like it's like the two ends of a spectrum again, because one is either it's so utterly has no cohesion, it basically falls apart. The other one is such a strong cohesion, it is indefinite otherwise.
Yeah.
So in the middle is where we end up having the most determination.
Yes. It's sort of like space. Space goes on forever. And even if you could find a limit, there's a point past that limit, and so on and so forth. And then eventually you get around to defining what matter is within space. Um, I'm just putting it in terms of the being portion of nature. So yeah, at this point, shape, immediate shape is like everything that shape could be, while also being just sort of like theoretical, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, 312. The brittle body, as implicitly the totality of formative individuality, deploys the difference of the notion. Yeah, difference, essence. The point first becomes the line where the form posits itself as opposed extremes, which as moments lack an existence of their own, but are held only in their relation, which appears as their middle term, like you said, and as the point of indifference in their opposition. This syllogism constitutes the principal formation in its developed determinateness and in this still abstract rigor, magnetism. Oh, sorry. Ugh. Mm. Hmm. Magnetism. Magnetism is a manifestation of shape. I'm not really getting it. What do you think?
Now, first of all, I'm just realizing how I had my moment of predicting what Hegel was going to say. The line where the form posited itself as opposite extremes. Um, like fashion, nature. I mean, it is in the sense kind of like an invisible force that's trying to posit a form. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading that first because it is two poles that are opposite coming together to form to kind of try to itself kind of is a form.
Yeah.
And they don't exist apart from each other, which again, just to me kind of makes me think back. This is how dialectics works too.
Yeah.
It's both the one and the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That all bodies show force principle as it exists in its pure abstraction. It would be in philosophical. The correct meaning is that every real, not merely brittle shape involves this principle of determinateness. The incorrect meanings all bodies all show forth this principle as it exists in its pure abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just reading it. He's using magnetism here is not the true kind of root, but it is the most common picture we'd see of two poles coming together to determine the whole thing.
So it's like a categorical it,
I guess magnetism would be like the most abstract in physics that would fit this, which is why he used it.
yeah, I think this is more categorical
Mm,
to try to talk about shape in terms of how it shows up.
well, and well, this is the
But it's
part,
not actual, it's not like actual material magnetism he's talking about.
right?
Or or is it?
This is the principle of magnetism, the tendency toward shape which has not yet come to rest, or formative form still has tendency.
Okay.
So it is still both in a way, in
Yeah.
a way. But there's a little more abstract concept he's trying to get here, where magnetism through the pictorialism of magnetism, that magnetism is still the basic uh physics example we have that best fits this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Probably later on, he talked about the relationship between magnetism and electricity. And at the time Hegel was writing this, there was a lot of research being done on that very subject. People like Ampere and Faraday. And I think Hegel was pretty much up on that research.
Hmm.
Yes, the concept is still
Oh, this is kind of cool. How is magnetism manifest? The movements present here may be grasped only in an ideal way, for magnetism cannot be interpreted sensuously. Um, the manifold, as sensuously apprehended, is only externally conjoined. Admittedly, this is also like, yeah, uh, like, how would you see that? Um, only externally conjoined. So, like, maybe you have a bar magnet, and I don't know.
but this is only the magnet, not yet magnetism.
Magnetism. Yeah,
Because
you're right.
remember back in the philosophy in the phenomenology of
Ah,
spirit.
ah, so magnetism itself, not the magnet.
Right.
Okay.
It's the
Well,
effect
right.
that proves the existence of the magnets.
And how do you talk about magnetism, the effect itself, apart from the magnet? That's not easy to do. And indeed, he says it's only externally conjoined. Like, yeah, of the two poles and the point of indifference connecting them, but this is only the magnet. God damn it, Hegel. He does it again every time. Not yet magnetism. In order to ascertain what is contained in this notion, we must, in the first instance, completely forget the sensuous image of a lodestone or iron stoked with the lodestone. He's telling me to forget the earth for just a second, which is another version of what contains magnetism. But then we must also compare the phenomena of magnetism with its notion to see whether they correspond to it. The identity of the differences is not posited here in external fashion. On the contrary, their identity is posited by the differences themselves. Dialectics. Uh, the movement of the magnet is no doubt still an external one, simply because the negativity has not as yet real self-subsistent sides, or the moments of the totality are not yet set free, do not yet enter into relationship with each other as different self-subsistent things. The center of gravity is not yet burst asunder. Blah, 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 shit. Um, God, he is a wordy son of a bitch.
I mean, this is the addition after all.
I know, I know. Such polarity. Oh, hell, here's his beef about polarity. Such polarity is often applied indiscriminately where it does not belong at all, for nowadays everything is full of polarity. Now, this physical opposition is not a sense datum. The North Pole, for example, cannot be chopped off. If the magnet is chopped in two, each piece is again a whole magnet. Yes, yes, exactly. The North Pole immediately arises once more in the broken part. Each pole posits the other and also excludes it from itself. In other words, the whole redefines itself, even if externally its shape or its configuration changes. Magnetism, if it's a property of that gravitational object, reasserts itself. Yeah. Okay. The terms of the syllogism cannot exist on their own, but only in union. See, all right, Kyle. Um, as you go through and read and or write notes, you, these are some of the parts that you really should like cut out and put in a note and be like, okay, let's develop this a little because like these nuggets are in here. They're just buried under like you know the rest of the stuff. Um, and that statement right there, the terms of the syllogism cannot exist on their own, but only in union, right? That can be applied to any place from the logic all the way to the end of spirit. But you don't read it until all the way out here, right? And so if you're having trouble with syllogistic reasoning in the logic and you get to the end and you never really get it, getting into nature, even if you're not completely fully up on the logic, can help to clarify some things. So yeah, translation for the audience, if anyone's watching, keep reading. Don't stop. Keep reading all the way to the end because even if the logic, even by the end of the book, doesn't make sense, you might find some answers within either nature or spirit, just depending.
I take it
Yeah.
Hegel would not like the idea of magnetic monopoles. There's always been physicists who posit the existence of magnetic monopoles, and I guess the only problem with them is nobody's ever observed them.
Well, yeah, because magnetism as a concept literally defeats the idea of a monopole.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, also,
I mean, unless the concept itself has been misconceived, which could be possible, but until you do that, you can't really prove the material existence of a monopole.
I
Yeah.
guess they're saying because in electricity, you do have electric poles, so you can have a separate negative and positive. My thought is because magnetism is a different view of electricity in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably why it can't be separate.
Yeah.
Is because it depends on a flow, so it depends on both sides, anyways. But who knows? Maybe there's a very special like state in the first 10 seconds of the universe that allowed it in a very exotic conditions.
Yeah. That's so cool. What is active in magnetism is nothing material but pure immaterial form. That's interesting. Passive and an active magnetism. Yeah. Free center. See, exploring the concept of magnetism um, under the essential idea of shape. It really makes sense because he's like using this as a metaphor to define how we should think of how shape as an essential category is organized. It has different parts in it, but those parts um are really quite abstract. They're I mean it's like he says, like he just said here, hang on. He just said pure immaterial form, right? Shape is the brittle body is still pure immaterial form, which is hard to say unless you draw a line between this and what we think of as magnetism. Um, and usually, like a vulgar materialist will look at this and say, well, you have the iron bar or you have the earth. And that's really all you can use. And Hegel is saying, no, you can't do that. You have to set aside the material form in order to get to the essential and how the essential works, the combination of differences that exist simultaneously to talk about what magnetism is. Okay. All right. I think I'm starting to get it. It's actually a pretty brilliant illustration. I like that. And it would probably help you if you ever decide to write a chapter, with like a diagram, Kyle, because like, you know, you could probably draw a few shapes to try to show what essential form the brittle body type looks like, um, using the idea of magnetism. Need to read it 3 or 4 times to get a good idea. It's kind of cool. Wow. Um, Sorry if you were reading that. Just move it around.
That's fine.
I was just seeing how long the damn section is.
Yeah, it's like several pages.
Wait, yeah, I mean, and which is fine, it's all good.
Okay. Just be careful, okay?
Okay. Um, all right. Mm-hmm. Hey guys, I think I have to go. I have to put the kids away, put the
No
kids to
problem.
bed. But let's for next time, let's read the rest of uh beta, and then which was the brittle body part. Like let's read it through and write down some notes, and also read um gamma 315, which is right here. um I don't mean to cut it short. It's just been a long day.
That's fine.
um Let's see how long gamma is real quick. Okay. So let's read up to page 178, actually. Can we do that? Let's read up to page 178, which gets into the particularization of the individual body. And it looks like there's more than enough to talk about with all of this. Yeah. All right, comrades, you take it easy. Have a good week, and I'll be more active on the DMs this week than last. Okay.
No worries.
All right, y'all take care.
You